Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. In this podcast, we'll be having discussions around the secrets which attract lasting, healthy, fulfilling relationships, creating a healthy mindset, and what women should know and understand about men. Introducing your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts, relationship expert, trainer, speaker, and best-selling author of the Cupid's Bow technique. Lyn's mission is to have a positive impact in reducing divorce, domestic violence, and suicide.
Welcome to the Hearts Entwined podcast. This is your host, Lyn Smith, the Queen of Hearts. And today, listeners, I've got Riana Milne. I'm really excited to have Riana on. She's a life, love, trauma, recovery, and mindset coach. So welcome, Riana.
Thank you for having me, Lyn. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here.
Now, Riana, you are a person who studied a lot around childhood trauma and how there is a direct correlation to the relationships we end up attracting. So tell us more about, initially, what got you into this and why you're doing what you're doing.
Well, I've been a psychotherapist since year 2000. So 22 years, August will be starting 23. And just that it so happened that my work took me into a lot of traumatic places. I worked in a mental health unit in a hospital for kids 5 through 19. I worked as a trauma coach in the schools for grades kindergarten all the way through college. So every level where I was dealing with upset kids, and they all came from traumatized homes. I also worked in drug and alcohol facilities as an LCADC, so teens with addiction and also women from the prison system. And then I went through 2 love traumas. And the second one, I had a question, why am I attracting toxic men? Yeah. What's the issue? I'm a nice lady. I'm smart. I'm a great mom. I'm a good friend, I'm honorable and live in integrity. So I couldn't understand it. And I went to 7 therapist friends of mine, and they were all shocked over what my ex had done. And I needed to heal myself. So I started doing the research. And the research showed me the direct correlation of childhood trauma, is what I called it in 2012 when I developed the childhood trauma checklist. So it's a combination of my experience and then my love traumas and healing myself that created and is the foundation of my coaching programs I do globally.
Oh, wow. That's an excellent resume you've got there, Riana. So I think you're perfectly qualified to talk us through what you've actually learned as a result of all that experience.
Oh, yeah. Well, later years, they did offer a CCTP, Certified Clinical Trauma Professional. It's like, oh, I got to take this because this is what I am already. So I'm advanced in that now, CCTP. But yeah, it was so life-shattering to me. And I'm like, oh my God, people need to know this. And at the time, I was at just a local practice outside of Atlantic City, New Jersey. Then I moved to Delray Beach, Florida. And it's like, I have to take my message to the world. So that's when I started talking about childhood trauma. I even had other therapists saying, you're making this up. This isn't true. And it's like, yes, it is. I just happened to do the deep research. It will reach around the world eventually. So I was one voice out there talking about this since 2015 on podcasts, which were fairly new back then.
Yeah.
But I correlated this list so that my clients could easily identify if they had trauma or not. So I'll go through what the top 10 are. There's more than that. I just want to preface it with childhood trauma is no one's fault. It's just that we are a product of our environment. Yeah. And as children, we pick up the norms of what our parents show and tell us. And then during the way, we have these bumps in the road that really do impact us as an adult. Also, that shows that it goes through at least 3 generations. And it can impact our gene expression. They showed in the research that offspring from the Holocaust tend to be a whole lot more anxious than the normal population because, their ancestors suffered with such stress and trauma during that time. So it's really a fascinating study, and there's always more and more research coming out on this. But the top 10 traumas that you might have gone through in your home or your environment or in schools, top 1 is, and they're no in particular order, but number 1 is if you grew up with any addiction in your household. So being an addictions counselor also, I named 12 of them. So drugs, alcohol, sex, meaning you knew your parent was a cheater, porn use, hoarding, eating, spending, gaming, gambling, TV watching, workaholism. I think I got all of them. Number two,
Well remembered of you.
yeah, any kind of addictive behavior was present in the household. Number two is verbal messaging. So how you watched your parents settle an argument, if they were yelling and screaming at each other as you were growing up, if they yelled at you, if they shut down and were mad at you for days or hours at a time, meaning they passive aggressive behavior. If you did not hear the words, I love you, or get verbal accolades like, I'm proud of you, kiddo, I saw you did your best. Things like that. The baby boomer generation, many of us did not hear the words, I love you from our parents. It was just not done back then. So
yeah, I can vouch for that.
Yeah. So it's, it leads to your sense of self-esteem. So really important to know as a parent what to do so that you don't evoke this in your own children. Okay. Number 3 is emotional abuse or neglect. Number 4 is any physical abuse, being beat up, rape or molestation that could have happened inside or outside of the home. Next one is around abandonment. And I identify fault or no fault. So a no fault abandonment is if a parent happened to die early, they had to leave the household to serve their country at war, or they traveled a lot to support the family. And that to them was doing a good thing. But there could be some emotional abandonment around that parent leaving all the time. And then fault abandonment is never being in your child's life, being in the life of the child while the couple was married or together. And the last one is you're present, you live there, but you're not emotionally connected, meaning you're not going to your kids' school events or sport events and really supporting them in their efforts. Okay, so that's abandonment, big one there. Next one is if you were adopted, part of the foster care system, or had to go live in another household. Your parents couldn't care for you. That's even could be grandma, an aunt, or a family friend, but you were sent away because of, whatever reasons. Number 7 is one that most people identify with. That's called personal trauma. And that's if you remember being just different in any way. You might have had a medical issue like asthma, or identified in the schools as ADHD, meaning there was a label on you and you felt different. You might have, and believe me, being that I was a trauma counselor, most of those kids just came from trauma. There wasn't an attention deficit. It was, they came in with their cortisol system so high that when cortisol is high, memory and focus is down. So I was very early on doing meditation in my office with these kids, and their grades went up, their behavior problems went down, so.
Better than tablets.
Yeah, knowing trauma really helps kids in the school if you know how to heal that and work with the brain around healing the trauma. The next one is, let's go on to more personal trauma. If you were coming out as LGBTQ and not accepted by your family or your peers, you might have been the only African-American in an all-Caucasian school, so it could be racial or cultural, feeling different, and being bullied. So there's a lot around personal trauma people could identify with. Number 8 is sibling trauma, meaning your sibling bullied you, or they were born with a medical issue, so that commanded more of mom's and dad's time away from you. Or, they were known and seen by you as the golden child, the favored one of the family. And for some reason you felt you couldn't measure up. So it could be the star athlete, more handsome, more beautiful, or the star student. Okay, number 9 actually has 2. I had to bring down number 11 because when I developed this list, looking back then, this was not so prevalent, but now it's the number 1 trauma most people are dealing with, which is community trauma. Look at what's happened in our world since COVID.
Yeah. Amazing.
And the political atmosphere and, all of this community, people are suffering with everything going on. This is also our Mother Nature events, floods, fires, hurricanes, anything that's impacting the community at large. Then the other part of 9 is family trauma. So of course, community trauma impacts the family, but also this could be if a parent was incarcerated, if you grew up in a dangerous environment, If you remember suffering with a lot of lack or lack messages, we don't have the money for this or that, and there was like a lot of lack in the household. It could have been if you were part of military family and had to move a lot, so there's a lot around family issues as well. And number 10 is mental health illness in mom or dad. And the baby boomers, our parents didn't really go to counseling, so we have to guess. And the two most difficult for kids to grow up around is bipolar and borderline personality disorder. So briefly, borderline means quick mood change. Sometimes they're good. When they're good, they're great. When they're bad, they're horrid, and they can get mad at a second's notice over something nobody else would get mad at. So this keeps a child very anxious growing up with a borderline parent. And then bipolar is manic depressive. So a manic phase could be high and happy, but it's often mixed with an addiction, like a gambling spree or spending spree. And then depression can show up as anger, checking out emotionally, or extreme fatigue. So those are the top 10 traumas that if you grew up with any of that, after we identify what they are, we also look at severity levels on a 1 to 10 scale. And then once I know that, I piece together what's going on in your adult life right now, why you're suffering in life, like ongoing anxiety, bouts of depression, lack of confidence, fear-based negative thinking, struggling on the employment issues, unhappy, but you stay in your job, so you stay stuck. And also the love relationship dynamic. If you're struggling in love, there's huge correlations there.
I love the fact, Riana, that you said, this can go through the generations, and give the example of, ancestors from the Holocaust impacting current generations today. Because
yes,
I do, when I speak to some women, hear that, they grew up in a happy household, for example, and they can't understand why they would, have any issues, let's say. But like you say, sometimes it's inherited stuff that's generationally in our bodies, isn't it? That's sometimes manifested outwardly that we're not even aware of.
Correct. If you had an anxious mom in utero, she was under trials, tribulations, struggle, a difficult marriage, then you tend to be born an anxious baby.
And I 100% get that. And, that was my understanding, without sort of really, I suppose, not being able to have an answer. My automatic thinking was, well, perhaps, it's a generational thing for you that you've inherited.
Yeah, very much so.
So having recognized that, it's either something that might have been a generational thing that's been inherited in terms of childhood trauma, or something that you can actually identify from that list specifically.
Let's go into love relationships and how that shows up, because that makes sense to a lot of people who's struggling in love. Well, if you're jealous or tend to be controlling of your partner, that's a sign of a lack of trust and self-confidence, and that you think maybe your partner wants another because what you offer is not good enough. So you might hold on too tight or try to control your partner's actions. And this comes from trauma number 7, personal trauma, and your verbal messaging. And of course, any emotional trauma and neglect, and then into abandonment. So that's where that comes from. If you have a lot of abandonment issue, this could lead to clinginess, anxiety when your partner is gone, reaching out to talk to other attention if your partner says no to intimacy that night and you feel rejected, instead of just understanding they're just not feeling up to it, not taking it personal. This is from abandonment issues. Also, codependency is from abandonment issues. If you grew up with a lot of anger, yelling and screaming, you tend to yell and act out that way yourself when you're not getting your way, or there's an issue and you don't know how to deal with it because it wasn't modeled to you how to communicate properly through an issue. Those with unhealed trauma can be impulsive, taking risky choices that destroy the relationship or hurt your partner, seeking out, again, affairs to feel better about yourself. Men can show a lot of perfectionism, where women tend to have a lot of blaming behavior, or both can have blaming behavior. My women tend to do a lot of people pleasing when they grew up around difficult parents, let's say an alcoholic father that was a yeller. So they would always try to please them, overdo for them. So this is a woman that might tend to overdo for her husband and her children. Nobody's doing back for her. That leads to burnout and resentment, obviously. And the boundaries are so stretched that there's no time for herself, but she's so used to that pattern of people pleasing just to keep the peace in the household. So, it's growing up with a lot of cheap drama, we call it. And some of those people that do seek out higher stimulation of cheap drama, like sexually acting out, or seeking power. Those with a lot of traumas and high severity levels, we see the levels of sociopathy, which means using another for pleasure, profit, or lifestyle advancement, especially growing up poor and wanting a better lifestyle. So they'll use another for that. Narcissism is at the high end of the scale as well. And of course, the highest end is psychopathy.
Yeah, and I do think, unfortunately, today, a lot of women label men narcissists or sociopaths when actually probably they're not specifically. And they might have one or two maybe bad behaviors that they've labeled that. But I think, for somebody to be a true narcissist or sociopath, that's really extreme, but it seems to be commonplace now to label any sort of negative behavior, especially women to men, as being a narcissist.
It tends to be the buzzword narcissist of the day. It is true, more men are considered narcissists than female, according to research. And they're saying like 2 out of 5 singles, when you're out there dating, could be narcissistic, sociopathic. Obviously, it's picking up a lot online. There's a lot of online rules that I teach my people to make sure that they're careful. So you really need to know what you're doing in dating world today. It's not just go out and fall in love by chemistry, which is the worst way to fall in love, because the chemistry is what your mind and psyche knows. Your brain likes to stay in homeostasis, meaning it likes what it knows. So if you grow up with that difficult parent, you're going to be tending to attract that. That's the chemistry buzz. And the brain cannot decipher, is this a good partner or a bad partner? It's the butterflies that most people go with, because that's how we were taught to fall in love, right? From the romance novels and the movies. And unfortunately, there's a whole lot to learn. It's not about the chemistry. Yes, there has to be an attraction factor. Eventually, you're making love to this person, but it can't be that. You have to look much deeper. I call the chemistry the icing on the cake. It's a very thin part of what's important. The cake is the most important. And without the cake, you've got nothing.
Absolutely.
The icing just melts, right? So the chemistry has to not be the number one priority.
I tend to, describe it as that sometimes in relationships, you might have the passion, the attraction, the intimacy, but it might be from a place of fear and like you was talking about, and what I call the unhealthy, and because I talk about energy, the masculine and feminine energy, and it for me, that comes from a place of unhealthy masculine and feminine energy, whereas you can still have that same attraction, passion, and intimacy, but it's where you come from more of a place of exuding that love and safety and security and confident energy, and that's when you get those healthy relationships rather than toxic ones.
I think it's really all about healing the childhood trauma wounds. That is important. A lot of us today, especially women, have a lot of masculine and feminine traits, and I say that's perfectly fine. I have a lot of masculine in me, but hey, I dress up in a dress on the weekends and wear jewelry, and I've got my feminine side out for the nights. But the masculine is something great to embrace. I mean, I grew up between 2 brothers. I was a tomboy, but it also gives you courage and the ability to be the entrepreneur, and for me as a single mom, be mother, father to my daughters and support them style I wanted them to. So I love my masculine side. But the toxic relationships really come from 2 people who have unhealed childhood wounds, that don't know the skills to talk through the issues, and that's okay. We weren't taught that. Some of the other things we see is low trust. poor understanding of social cues and interactions, difficulty forming relationships, even with your children or peers, to have a lot of friends. And they attract these cycles of abuse and neglect. And, we want to make sure they're not attracting any more of these toxic or narcissistic type partners. And the research shows every relationship, we call it the 90-day rule, is usually great and passionate and wonderful in the first 90 days. And then as soon as people start relaxing or getting a little bit more committed, so that could be engagement, moving in together, marriage, or having a child, then the toxic things start to becoming more evident with stress. And that's why, we take things slow. You ask these certain questions. There's like 24 questions that my clients know to ask on date 1 or 2. So if they know if it's a one and done date or they're moving forward, because we know everyone has childhood trauma, but did they do something to heal it? Have they looked into that and healed that for themselves? Because without it, you're going to see some, maybe aggression or poor impulse control, sexually acting out, drug and alcohol misuse or other addictions, poor self-regulation and boundaries. So there's a lot to know. And physically, healing childhood trauma is major. The Kaiser Permanente study with over 17,000 people who are overweight people from childhood trauma, they did a study over time, and they showed if this trauma was not healed, it led to sleep disorder, poor immune system functioning, so fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome, cardiovascular disease, IBS, shorter lifespan. So healing the trauma for overall health, happiness, and wellness is essential. And it's important that we have 2 emotionally healthy people coming into a relationship to make that emotionally healthy, evolved, and conscious relationship. That's super important.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree. Healing the trauma and any baggage that you may have not really consciously maybe picked up from experiencing poor relationships in the past as well, that all need to be looked at before actually thinking about a new relationship. And your singledom is a great time really to actually focus on self, isn't it, and embrace that single time to actually look at all this stuff to make sure you're in the best position to attract the healthiest relationship possible next time.
Exactly. Too many people make the mistake. There used to be saying, get back up in the saddle. In other words, you came right out of a toxic relationship, jump back out there and date and make yourself feel better. Well, that's one of the worst things you can do, because you're going to attract a similar type. And doing that over and over again, we call that RRS, relationship repetition syndrome. So by the time my ladies and men come to me, it's usually like, oh my God, I had a toxic marriage, 2 toxic boyfriends, can't figure out why. I'm frustrated. I'm afraid to get back out there because I might do it again. And that's usually, when they come to me for their healing. So it's really important. First, we heal the childhood and love trauma. They understand it. We do all the mindset work around it. I do vitamin therapy, meditation, using a 150-page workbook. So, it's not fluff course. It's very intensive healing. And it takes 4 to 6 months, but you've got these skills the rest of your life. And then part 2 is like, okay, now you're going out to date. Let's pick somebody different who is emotionally healthy. What does that look like? What do you need to do differently? And by the time they go out dating, they feel like they are the whole package. They are emotionally and psychologically ready, and they know the art and science of attracting a great partner, and they can kindly say no to who's not good for them and say yes and move forward to those who is with confidence and empowerment. So it makes a big difference.
It certainly does. And it's well worth that 4 to 6 month investment. I can really vouch for that, having done that work on myself. It absolutely is 100%, and you are worth that investment. We're quite often prepared to invest in things like new cars, holidays and things like that, and spend
for everybody else. We always take care of everyone else. That's important to take care of you now, right?
Yeah, it's such an important thing to reinforce. So Riana, what is your best contact information for any of our audience that'd like to get in touch with you?
The best place to start is my website, and it's my name, rianamilne.com. So that's RianaMilne.com. And on there, you can get my free book on how to have the love you deserve on the homepage. Under books, you can get the first 60 pages of my #1 bestseller, Love Beyond Your Dreams, Break Free of Toxic Relationships to Have the Love You Deserve and Live Beyond Your Dreams About the Mindset for Success. There's also 4 love quizzes on there for singles or couples. So find out how you're doing emotionally. The childhood trauma quiz is on there. And my podcast, Lessons in Life and Love, on YouTube or any other podcast platform. My YouTube channel, I think, has 200 videos and audios. So I'm on every social media under Coach Riana Milne or Riana Milne. So come join me on social.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Riana. So before we end and wrap up the episode, any final words of advice or words of wisdom that you'd like to share before we end?
Yeah, I just want to say it's time to create the life you desire and have the love you deserve. Don't wait. You're worth it. Life is short. And, you don't want to live it in a state of unhappiness. Do something. Just take the first step. Super important.
Excellent. So thank you so much for your very informative lists of all those childhood trauma signs and symptoms, which really, I think, will highlight to most people listening to this podcast why previously they may or may not have had healthy relationships. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Riana.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here. I hope that was helpful for people.
So that just leaves me to say, listeners, until next time, true love starts with opening our hearts, and goodbye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Hearts Entwined podcast. You can follow Lyn via the Facebook group 2 Hearts Entwined, or search Lyn Smith, inspirational speaker, at LinkedIn, or email lyn@hearts-entwined.com. That's LYN@hearts-entwined.com. Remember, true love starts with opening our hearts.